You have to have standards because, as cliche as it sounds, in times of chaos, you fall to the level of your standards. You do not rise to the level of your goals. And that's why there are certain times of the year where my life can sort of get flipped upside down, just like yours, and I can maintain my momentum. Maybe I don't go as fast, as straight as I normally do, but because I have a standard in my life, I do not go backwards. My name is Brian Pannuzzo. I'm an executive coach that helps successful professionals get wealthy outside of the office in their mind, their body, and their relationships. I'm an expert at this because I did it myself. I sat inside of corporate America in a seat likely just like one that you sit in today for 2 decades. If I can do it, so can you. Welcome back to the show. I hope you had a very Merry Christmas and an early Happy New Year to you. We are just upon the last day or so of 2024. Maybe you're not listening to this until the first couple of days of 2025. It's January 30th, 2024. I always like to timestamp when someone's listening to this, although you kind of see the date in the description or the title or wherever you click on this. So you should probably know, but sometimes we don't think about that. Sometimes people go and sort of binge listen to different shows and they lose context of when it is in time. Isn't this a cool medium, a cool way to communicate with people? I'll have people that will watch this 6 months from now, 1 year from now. And that's really awesome. It's also cool to see where you were in a particular area of your life, phase of your life. We have pictures, that we look back on, or we have moments in time that we can identify, where we can look back and say, I was there then, I'm here now. And so I always think that's kind of cool. So I do oftentimes mention to you when it is for my loyal weekly listeners and watchers on YouTube. I know you know when it is, so thank you. And happy holidays to you. A happy early New Year to you. I referenced this last week, but I'll say Happy New Year next week to you because it'll still be close enough to January 1st. It'll be January 6th when the next podcast drops. I mean, that is like really pushing it for me. I am a don't wish me a Happy New Year kind of guy past the first couple of days. If we haven't spoken for several weeks and you reach out to me or I reach out to you in the middle of January or towards the end of January and you wish me a Happy New Year, I know now many people are just going to do that randomly. And I appreciate the ball busting. But just know that that's not acceptable. It really is not acceptable. All right. Happy New Year should be reserved for the first couple of days. And we move on to our business, handle our business. I want to talk this week on ways you can handle your business maybe a little bit more effectively in the new year. I'm not going to do like a whole a goals episode, although I will talk a little bit about standards today versus goals. And I truthfully had a slightly different idea for this recording as of a week or two ago. And I'm glad I was a little late to the party in terms of recording it because I had a conversation on New Year's Eve with someone I had just met for the first time at a friend's house. And I walked away from it thinking this is so many people that struggle with this. And so I thought I would sort of weave it into ways you can be more successful in 2025, specifically when it comes to body composition, physical change, seeing, the scale go down, fat loss, muscle building, because there's a lot of things that I help people with, but predominantly I think most people at least are initially attracted towards the aspect of changing their life physically. When I say things like, get wealthy inside of your mental performance and your relational performance, yeah, people want that, but nobody really goes, man, I gotta really improve my relationship, so I'm gonna hire Brian. Typically, it revolves around the body first, and then they realize that all these other aspects of their life could also use to be improved, which is the same process and the same evolution that I went through. And so one quick word about resolutions and goals in 2025 and planning, because most people will be thinking about that over the course of the next 48 hours, all the way through to the end of this week, likely, because it's like kind of a quiet week. I guess, what is it? New Year's Day will be Wednesday of this week. I got to do math real time in my head. I'm letting you under the hood to the supercomputer here, see how slow it processes. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. So likely you've been thinking about some of this stuff leading up to today, if you are listening on Monday or on Tuesday. And most likely you'll continue to think about it for the first few days of the new year, the last few days of this week, and then understand that whatever it is that normally was happening in your life will come right back and recycle itself, and you'll be right back in to the mixer. And so last week I said to my clients, this was a great time to spend some time up in the clouds. There's the clouds and the dirt, right? Proverbially. We want to spend time up in the clouds. We want to focus on goals and desires and outcomes that we want to happen. We need to have that. We need the destination in the GPS, in Waze, in order to know what to do in the dirt, the turn-by-turn directions. We can reverse engineer the actions that we need to take based on the goals that we have. Not enough people have specific enough goals, like really sexy, desirable goals, because for a lot of reasons, and I won't get into this, is many podcasts we could do on this. Oftentimes people don't allow themselves to dream enough. They don't push themselves to stretch far enough. They stop themselves because something inside of them, society, whatever, has told them that they don't need to have a six-pack. They don't need to have, better, more quantity, more quality of sex in their relationship. Yeah, my wife and I, we have sex a couple times a week. It's fine. It's good. It's pretty good. I know guys that haven't had sex all month. While that may be true, of course you would like to have more than 2 times a week. What if it was 4 times a week? What if the quality actually doubled? What if she was the one who was initiating more? What if she decided and started to do things that you have only fucking dreamed about for the last, 20 years of your relationship? And so there's always another level to every area of our life. That's the beauty and the curse sometimes about this race we are all running. When I say we, I mean people who are paying attention to me and running with me inside of my programs, or if you're paying attention and actively participating in the things that we talk about via my methods of communication, my content, my emails, my podcast, my social media content, right? There's no end to the game. There's no end to the race. It is as ultra of an ultra marathon as you can find. There is one end. It's, the end for all of us. And I always say, maybe it's the last 6 months to a year. I'll let you post up on the recliner, have your grandkids, start bringing you a bunch of beers or whatever, and just kind of waste away those last 6 months or so. But before that, man, we're getting after it. We are getting after it. All right. So there's no end to this race. So there's always improvement you can make. There's always more money to make. You could have said you should be satisfied with your career 5 years ago, maybe. But I know you haven't been, and I know you've continued to push. So why wouldn't you continue to push and not settle for this level of pretty good? Maybe it's slightly above mediocre. Maybe it is mediocre. Maybe you came from really, really bad, and now you're mediocre, and it's just okay because you can't find the motivation to take it to the next level. And so I told all of my clients last week that this is a great time to start to consider daydreaming a little bit, be up in the clouds. This week, I told them it's very important that they start to set standards for 2025. Everyone's going to set goals over the next week or previous to this past week or last week. Everyone's going to think about goals. What do I want to accomplish? That's great. We need to do that. But you must ultimately get yourself down to what are the actions that I must take in order to get the goal that I say that I have. Nobody thinks about that relationship enough. And are you willing to do the things that are required in your life to get the things that you want? Most people have a massive gap in between the two things, and they don't think about how to reconcile it. Sometimes it means that you have to be willing to do more things. Other times, you might say, I can't do more things. This is what I'm capable of doing. That might mean we have to accept a slightly lower goal. All right. But what will happen over the course of the next several weeks is life will come right back. You will be off vacation. You'll be off, the first week or two hangover in air quotes of the year. Nobody wants to go to client dinners the first week of the year. I get that. Activity in the markets won't pick up, in its entirety until the middle of January. And so all of the things that keep you from doing the stuff that you need to do, no one's really traveling for business the first week or two of January. Most likely. I know there are exceptions to every rule. But once these things do start to happen, we will fall back into the patterns that we've always fallen into. And that's why most resolutions, most goals end up failing, because there isn't a plan associated with that. And more importantly, nobody says this is the bare minimum that I'm willing to accept in my life. And if there's one thing you can take away from this message, and there's one thing that you can establish for yourself in January of 2025 and for the rest of your life, is start to think about, what are my standards in my life? What are my standards for my money, my career? You do this unconsciously if you haven't done it already, actually done it on a piece of paper. I refuse to be worth less than X millions of dollars. I refuse to make less than $750,000 per year. I refuse to this. I refuse to that. Those require you. So if you had a goal to a standard to not make less than $1 million per year, and then your actions down below were showing up to work 3 days a week, most weeks, you quickly would realize that those two things do not align, and one of them is going to break real quick. And most people don't do this, certainly don't do this in their physical performance. A lot of people don't do it in their relationships as well. And so if you have a standard for what it is you are willing to accept, it's going to demand certain things from you. So what is your standard for your physical body? What is the weight on the scale that you are unwilling to go above? What is, can you see your abs? Can you do certain things physically? Start to think about what your standard is. And then you have to then back into, well, that's going to require me to go to the gym at least 3 days a week. 4 or 5 would be great, but I do not go to the gym 3 days a week. It requires me to eat certain foods most of the time. It requires me to communicate with my wife daily or weekly or whatever it may be. You have to have standards, because as cliche as it sounds, in times of chaos, you fall to the level of your standards. You do not rise to the level of your goals. And that's why there are certain times of the year where my life can sort of get flipped upside down, just like yours, and I can maintain my momentum. Maybe I don't go as fast, as straight as I normally do. Maybe I start to slow down and wiggle around and maybe stay in neutral for a period of time. But because I have a standard in my life, I do not go backwards. March of 2024, as I've mentioned on this podcast before and in some of my content, was a very good example of that. We had a lot going on in our lives in March of 2024. We lost our dog. My back was in really bad shape for the entire month. My whole family was sick for 2+ weeks. And any one of those things can create enough distress in your life, enough chaos in your life where it throws you out of your routine. And once you're out of your routine, you're currently in a new routine. Understand, anytime you fall out of a routine, you haven't fallen out of a routine. You've started a new routine. So you stay in that new routine for too long of a period of time. And if you've listened to me a lot, you know that I'm a big fan of transition back and forth between experiential moments and non-experiential moments. Everyone fucks up that transition. Nobody does it fast enough. Think about how quickly, for my basketball audience, how quickly you got to get from offense back to defense. Because if you don't, layups and dunks are happening on you all day long. And so you have to transition back and forth. And when you have standards, that is a safeguard for you to transition quickly. Because if I have a standard of going to the gym 4 or 5 days a week, and I don't go for 2 consecutive days in a row, all of a sudden, my standard mandates that I go to the fucking gym for the rest of the week if it's 5 days. So it forces me to think about, well, let me look at Monday. Let me look at Tuesday. Wow, I'm going to be on a plane all day on Monday and not have access to the gym. And Tuesday, I have meetings, and then I'm flying back home. And so does that mean I can get to the gym Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday? No, I can't. Okay, so what is my new standard for the week? My new standard for the week is 4 days because I'm going to go Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, whatever. You have to start to think about this stuff and establish standards in your life. Not just today, though. That's the key, not just today. You have to revisit this every single week. And that's one of the things we do inside of my programs is that we make sure you are revisiting your commitments on a weekly basis. The issue with New Year's resolutions is that people will write them down today. They'll write them down this week. They'll think about them in their head, and they will never revisit them over and over and over and over again. I've showed you guys before pictures of goals that I have. I've showed you my morning formula worksheet. I'm holding this up on YouTube for everyone right now. All right. I pay attention to this stuff on a daily basis. I come back to it. I remind myself that I'm not currently where I want to be in many areas of my life. And we need that repetition. You need the repetition, especially when it's new, especially when it's far away from you. I can say things like, I want to be worth $25 million. But if I don't constantly remind myself, at some point, I'm going to get comfortable with either my current net worth or think that just a few more $1 million will probably be good enough because I go places that I want to go. I do things that I want to do. I live in one of the nicest areas of the country. My son goes to a private Catholic high school. We do not lack for things in our lives. Do I want more? I certainly want more. But do I feel like we're lacking in areas of our life? Not always. So will I be motivated to go double my net worth, triple my net worth, whatever it may be? Maybe not. Maybe not all the time. And this works with money. It also works with your body. If you were 70 pounds overweight and you've lost 40 pounds, that's awesome. Celebrate that. But so many people get stuck 20 pounds over, 15 pounds over, 10 pounds over, maybe not as strong as you should be. Maybe you're not that unhealthy of a weight, but when you take your shirt off, there ain't nothing impressive about you. So you have to remind yourself on a regular basis of what it is that you want and then connect it to a standard in your life. If you can develop a standard in your life that matches the goals that you have, you're done. You're set. Yes, could you use some expert planning, some accountability, some weekly connection with other people? Of course you could, but you're going to be pretty damn successful. Okay. One tactical piece of information I thought I could provide in this week's podcast, which, as I'm now thinking about everything that I just shared with you, I think that was pretty darn good. But let's over deliver here. Okay. So the conversation I had with a gentleman that I had just met a few days ago was enlightening to me because I'm having it more and more and more and more. And I'm attracting people who already care about what it is that's going on in their life. They're already trying. You know, when I first started this, I tend to attract kind of your typical, health coach audience, somebody who's drinking way too much, who's 50, 60, 70 pounds overweight, who just needs to do a lot of the basics over and over and over again. And while we all need to do a lot of the basics over and over again, and while we all probably drink too much, I'm raising my hand. I'm not just being accusatory towards you. I'm beginning to attract people who are closer and closer and closer to that elite level of mental, physical, and relational performance in their life. And the cool thing is that every single one of those people continue to want more. And they are happy to pay someone to work with them to help them time collapse their results. Oftentimes, much more so than the people who struggle to have the motivation to get off the couch. Those people tend to worry about things like the cost and the time and the commitment of certain programs. When you find people who are close enough to taste it, they're like, what's the fucking price? Who cares? Let's go. All right. So that's been pretty cool for me. And this gentleman, I just met him. I would put him kind of in that category, although he probably had a longer way to go from a physical standpoint. But why I can relate him to those people who I just suggested, who I've begun to work more and more with over the last couple of years, is because he's already doing stuff. Okay. Very rarely do I attract someone who's like, yeah, I haven't gotten off the couch in 5 years. Most people are beginning to do something, and they're realizing that what they're doing is not really working because they're stuck. And what happens is they kind of blame it on something else. They tell themselves a story that, they're just not able to get past a certain, weight range or do whatever. And so this guy is a CEO, bigger guy. He's tall. He was almost my height. He's probably 6'4", 6'5". I'm 6'6" for context for people. You can't really tell when I'm sitting down. He had been up around 285, 290 pounds, and he was struggling to get every time he got to around 270 pounds. He just started to struggle. He just couldn't break through, and he just kind of churns around there. And that's where he currently was when we had our conversation. The conversation started out great, meaning I was like, oh, this guy kind of knows what to do. He knows what to do. He started talking about a high protein diet. He mentioned healthy fats. Cool. Starting to check some boxes. And then it's like it started to go a little bit in the direction that, most of my conversations tend to go. And normally I just let people talk because they just want to tell you what they're doing so that you can validate it and they can feel like they're doing the right thing, typically. So I often do not engage in a conversation that I would have with somebody who is paying me or somebody who I believe actually wants to hear some constructive answers and advice. And so I didn't say anything at first. We just kept talking. I just kept it casual, but I started to like the guy. I started to, we started to connect a little bit. And so I basically asked his permission at the end to share some advice with him. But he was doing a lot of the things that you'll hear from a lot of people. He was avoiding carbohydrates. He was eating lots of healthy fats. He was doing high intensity interval training. He was fasting all the time. And he was eating a lot of protein. Okay. He doesn't suffer from not having the means. He's a CEO of a business. He recently had been traveling all over the world with his family. He was able to live a pretty amazing life, on the road, while still running his very large business. And so after finally, I started to ask him a couple questions, not like, hey, you should do these things. I just got inquisitive. I asked him, are you tracking your calories on a daily basis? You mentioned proteins and healthy fats. Also, are you tracking what you're consuming? No, I'm not tracking anything that I'm consuming. Cool. Not many people do. So I didn't expect him to say yes. I said, how many steps a day are you taking? Do you walk? He's like, no, I have to sit around a lot throughout the day because of my job. But I do get to the gym. I go to the gym. Of course you go to the gym. Everyone, who's trying usually is going to the gym to get that 45-minute workout in. And then we started to talk a little bit about carbohydrates. And, I started to ask him about, how much fiber are you consuming, and you're prioritizing, fruits and vegetables. And he's worried about the glucose response and the sugar. And I just kind of smiled. And, at this point, I felt like I had enough credibility with him. And of course, I'm wearing like a pretty tight shirt, so I'm looking jacked as fuck, right? And so I clearly looked the part. So I believe I've earned the credibility with him. We've built some rapport. I've asked permission to give him a little bit of advice because I know what I'm saying is right, but I want him to actually value it and not just brush it off. And so I asked him, I said, let me ask you a question. Do you mind if I ask you a question? He said, sure, go ahead. I said, do you know anyone who is 40 or 50 pounds overweight? Because so this guy's 270 right now. Like at no height are you not overweight at 270, in my opinion, unless you're an NFL lineman or a defensive end. Okay. So at that stage, you might actually be deemed in good shape. And I still would say that linemen are intentionally overweight, right? But maybe there's a 6'7", 275 pound defensive end or outside linebacker somewhere in the NFL that I am unaware of, and they are in elite shape. Fine. Unicorn, 1% or less of the population. No CEO, professional inside of corporate America is 270 pounds and at a healthy weight. Okay. So if you are currently at 270 pounds, or I would argue anywhere within 20 pounds lower than that, definitely higher than that, you are not healthy. You are not at a healthy weight. I don't care what your fucking blood work says. You're not at a healthy weight. You should lose weight. Sooner or later, your blood work or whatever your doctor is telling you or whatever you think the story you've told yourself is not going to be true. I can promise you that. So he needs to lose more weight. All right. So we started talking about carbs and this and that and whatever. And I said, do you know anyone who's 270, who's struggling to lose weight that, blames it on or just can't stop eating enough watermelon or, sweet potatoes or strawberries or broccoli or spinach or cauliflower or green beans or whatever. And so I said it with a smile. He knew what I was getting at. He kind of laughed himself. And to be fair, at the time that we were talking, we were both holding, a Bloody Mary or a vodka, club soda, a splash of OJ at noon on Christmas Eve. So we started talking a little bit about alcohol consumption and where that leads to and the lower quality food choices and reducing the inhibition and all these things. And so I left him with a little bit of advice, and I'm going to follow up with him because we developed a connection and we became friends. I suggested to him that if he wanted to have different results in 2025 than he's ever had, to do a few things. And I will leave you with these things. Okay. And this will get you pretty far. It may not get you where you want to go, but it'll get you pretty far. All right. Instead of focusing on carbohydrates are the devil and sugar is the demon. Okay. And eating, multiple handfuls of mixed nuts and having a full avocado with everything that you consume and lathering olive oil all over your food because it's very healthy, and it is. Start to think about how many calories am I consuming and understand that fat calories are more than double calorically dense, we would call them, than carbohydrate calories. And by simply changing your thought process of, can I go high protein, high healthy fats? Can I go high protein, high fiber? Now, do some things that are high in fat also consume fiber like avocado? Yes, they do. All right. Is avocado very healthy for you? Yes, it is. Can you consume too many calories very quickly from olive oil, from avocado, from nuts, cashews, almonds, walnuts, whatever, from the fat in some of the healthier protein sources like salmon or red meat or whole eggs? That one gets a little bit more nuanced, but yes, you can. You absolutely can. I know a lot of people who are, quite frankly, fucking fat and they're constantly doing keto. How's that working out for you? And so start to think about, I gave him a couple ideas. Number one, let's just get away from the nuance of nutrition. Number one, walk more, bro. I was like, dude, buy a $10 pedometer. I took it out of my pocket at the time. I was already at like 16,000 steps at noon because I had a very active morning. I'm holding up my pedometer for everybody who's not on YouTube right now. By the way, at 12:43 in the afternoon, I'm at 11,307 steps. All right. How much are you moving? And can you get that number up? I don't care what it is. Now, if you're moving 10, 12, 13,000 steps a day, the likelihood that you're going to need to lose 50 pounds, I think dramatically reduces. Do I know some people who are moving that much, who need to focus more of their attention on what they're consuming, which is always going to be the highest leverage activity? Yes, I do. But for the most part, do people who are not at their goal weight and who need to lose a large percentage of their body weight, or at least a reasonable percentage, could they benefit from walking more? 100% they could. But Brian, you don't understand my job and this. I get it. Cool story. I work with so many people just like you that find a way. I help them do that, but ultimately it's you who's got to find a way. All right. I know it takes time, but here's the thing. When you're just going to your high intensity interval training class and beating yourself to death at this class, you are burning more calories than when you just do a 45-minute walk. 100% accurate. But you can walk more throughout the day. And over time, you can accumulate the same caloric burn that you do when you do that 45-minute session. Even more importantly, that quantity of walking, that caloric burn, that deficit that you create on the energy expenditure scale. So this is a scale that's moving back and forth. We need to tip the scale into caloric deficit for you in terms of energy balance. At the end of the day, this is a science equation, all right? Math equation, science experiment. I don't know. We need to get you into calorie deficit. And when we walk, we do not stoke the same hunger. This is the key part. We do not stoke the same hunger response as when we do that high intensity interval training class, whether it be the intervals that you're doing at Orange Theory or your Barry's boot camp class or your CrossFit class or whatever it may be. Are all of those things bad? No, they're not bad. May you want to reconsider your modality of exercise if your main goal is body composition change? Yes, you should. Because there is no greater combo in the world than you walking a shit ton, than you lifting weights 3 to 4 days per week. And when I say lift weights, I don't mean sprint around the gym to every single machine that you can find with zero rest. Those of you who work with me know what the hell I'm talking about. If you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, send me an email at brian@thesuccesslift.com and I'll explain it to you. All right, I'll even send you a few resources as well. Lift 3 to 4 days a week. Move your ass more. Start to manage your calories. Now, you can track your calories, which would be highly advisable. But for some of you, you're already telling yourself a story that would be too hard. I'm not really sure how it's hard to buy a $15 food scale on Amazon that could be at your house in 6 hours and spend 30 seconds every time you eat, just getting an idea of what it is you're consuming. And then 5 minutes a day, planning out what you're going to eat in an app that gives you data that you would pay millions of dollars for if it was something at the office that produced the outsized return that this produces. You would fucking pay $1 million for it in a heartbeat. But you look at it as something that's too much of an inconvenience, or it's too intense, or it's crazy, or it's whatever. All right? Start to understand what you're consuming. And then you might want to consider swapping out some of these higher calorie foods that you're consuming that you think are healthy. And when we say healthy, of course, there are very healthy properties to them, but they are racking up calories into your nutrition that you are not really counting for and you're not thinking that's causing an issue for you, and they are. Right? Nobody just eats one small handful of nuts. Have you ever measured what the serving size of cashews are for like 210 calories? It's utterly depressing. Have you ever measured what a couple tablespoons of peanut butter actually is for 200 calories? You can fit it up in not one nostril and snort it. So you might want to consider either dramatically reducing or removing some of these foods for a period of time. I tell my fat guys that they probably should just throw the peanut butter away because it's so easy to overconsume. It's so calorically dense. Is it bad? No, nothing's bad. Nothing's bad. Nothing's good. I've been eating Christmas cookies for the last week and a half. All of them are bad for you, but I've been doing it in the context of understanding about how many calories are in the cookies and then building them into a plan that I have for myself because I'm an expert and I help people do this for themselves. And so of course, I've been over consuming some days, but overall they've been fitting into my plan because I understand that I'm consuming roughly 500 calories of cookies, and I have a certain number of calories per day that I need to consume in order to look and feel a certain way. And I either have to include those in and not eat certain other things and find a way otherwise, or know that I'm going to push myself on that scale to energy surplus. And when you push yourself to energy surplus for long enough, you gain weight 100% of the time. So if you're not losing weight and you feel like you're doing it all right, you are not broken, I promise you. You are likely doing things inefficiently. You are likely not accounting for certain aspects of your lifestyle that are contributing to the results. Maybe you're not walking enough. Maybe your training needs to be changed. Maybe you're not paying close enough attention to the foods that you're putting in to your body, both on a quality standpoint, quantity standpoint, and also it is nuanced. Okay. In a fat loss phase, i.e. dieting, we probably want to limit or remove. It's probably limit. We don't need to remove anything, but limit olive oil, avocado, peanut butter, nuts, all these other things that we consume. There is no one in the world who is getting fat because of the glucose spike from eating strawberries, watermelon, sweet potatoes, rice, and potatoes. I promise you that. Now, are some of those things easier to overconsume, like rice? Yeah, they are. But is rice the reason that you don't have a six pack, or you're 30 pounds overweight? Not even fucking close. So start to think about, is what I'm doing getting results? And if it's not, you might want to consider another way. Spend some time this week thinking about what your standards are. Do they align with the goals that you have? When shit hits the fan, not if, when shit hits the fan in another 2 weeks, will you be prepared? Will you have standards in place? Will you have a weekly program that you follow from an expert who may have done this for a long period of time and made a lot of mistakes and figured it out and worked with hundreds of people and optimized things to make you get the best results in the shortest period of time? Do you have a weekly accountability system where you check in and others are expecting you to do the things you say you need to do? That is the foolproof way for you to get exactly what you want in 2025. I cannot thank you enough for you and your attention and listening to this show and tuning in on a weekly basis and sharing it with a friend and leaving a podcast rating and review. And if you haven't done any of those few things that I just mentioned, there's still time to do it before the end of the year. Happy New Year. I hope you had an amazing holiday season. I am so thankful for you, and I can't wait to help you take your life to the next level in 2025. I'll see you back here next year.